everybody, it's Tuesday. Thank you all for joining. Hello, this one should be called 44 Nuggets because that's what you're going to find today. So, happy Tuesday. Crypto market cap 1.1 trillion. Bitcoin hanging strong, very strong against many other assets. Volume 50 billion. That's up 30 billion since we last spoke. Bitcoin price 28,550, pretty much on the nose. Dominance 51%. ETH dominance 17.4%. ETH dominance normally around 19%, so it's lower than normal. And fear and greed is at 52, which we'll talk more about too. And welcome. This is edutainment, not financial advice. And this is a critical time in our lives. And get ready for some mind expansion. Nowhere on the internet will you find this type of analysis, data, models, etc. And that comes with a guarantee. Let's start with the good news, everybody. Oh yeah, subscribe if you want to get smarter. We'll start with the good news today. Quite a bit of good news. And the topic of today's video is 90 days to go, I was going to call it. But really, the ETF is inevitable. There's so much chatter everywhere. Mainstream media is going nuts over this. So let's go through a couple of quick things. CNBS. Watch now, ETF Edge with Cathie Wood and getting closer than ever to a spot Bitcoin fund. So there's a lot of positivity there, a lot of analysis, and how we're 90% sure it's coming. But there's more about the date. Bitcoin ETF looks inevitable. Here's the playbook from Barron's. You know, all these magazines that never historically really spoke about Bitcoin, how they're all over it. And this is great. You got Larry Fink on TV saying, it's the next great thing. He couldn't talk about Bitcoin directly because they're filing for an ETF. He mentioned crypto, but he means Bitcoin. And can you imagine when he presses the button and his army of salespeople, I think there's like 10,000 salespeople that sell funds and assets and stuff. Wow, it's going to be bonkers. And then also, this is from Crypto Magazine, Bitcoin could rise up to 45,000 in January once the spot ETF is approved, this asset manager says. And remember, my target is kind of 35 to 42 by April 2024, but a lot of people are even more bullish. Zeno, Mr. Hammer, thank you so much for being here. But this is all very, very positive. And we had that kind of fire drill yesterday. I actually saw the term fire drill that I mentioned live on DCA right when it happened, re-mentioned. So it's good to know that people are watching DCA too, which is fantastic. But let's drill into a lot more stuff that's going on. Fear and greed is up to 52. Which is positive. And remember, when it goes high, it's actually good. It means people aren't as fearful. When it's low, people are terrified. And that's the highest it's been in quite some time, which is excellent. Let's look at the crypto market cap over the last 7 days divided by Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin has gone nowhere divided by Bitcoin. But three big green marks here. TON, Solana beat Bitcoin by 6% over the last week. OKB, also dark green. But the rest of the names didn't. So it's weird. There's a huge break now. Kind of different assets are going different directions, which is awesome. That's why I always say you need to excise out the top assets from an index, like the S&P 500. So you pull out the top 7, it's a bunch of garbage. Well, that might be a little bit too strong a word, but that's kind of what I mean. Same thing with crypto. 23,000 names. 98 to 99% will never go anywhere. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the harsh news. This is Bitcoin against US dollars over the last 7 days. Ethereum down 1%. Bitcoin up 3% to at that 28,500 level. And a lot of other names too. Solana nearly had a 10% week. Even ICP was up. BSV was up too. A lot of weird names, but a lot of older names are kind of not going anywhere fast. And that's been the trend as well in this whole, what I call an early bull market, which we are 10 months into right now. A lot of names just aren't going anywhere. Stock market, very mixed, but also not too turbulent, which is good. Microsoft up, again, just shy of 1%. Apple, same thing. Google, same thing. Amazon up 1.3%. Tesla down 3.44%. Tons of FUD, tons of anxiousness out there regarding earnings tomorrow. That'll be a fun one. I'll be watching that, as will every other Tesla fan out there. Nvidia got a little hit today. Some nervousness about Biden administration banning them selling anything, even their lower end products to China. And that took the stock down 4%, which is about $20. A bit of a hit, but it did rebound very nicely too as well. Now, let's look at Bitcoin as an asset class compared to all the top asset classes on the planet. is always interesting to look at. Bitcoin just eclipsed half of the market cap of silver. Ladies and gentlemen, silver is just shy of 1.3 trillion and Bitcoin just broke a little bit over that. So we're halfway there. I do believe this bull run, Bitcoin should surpass silver if we are lucky, unless of course silver goes to the moon too, then it'll be hard to chase, especially with such a head start. Other names on the list as well. Well, at the very top, the big gorilla, 12.752 trillion in market cap is gold. But nobody can really tell if that's true or not because it's impossible to verify. Unlike Bitcoin, you can verify exactly what's going on the chain. And for the record, everybody, I own these assets in full disclosure: Google, Nvidia, Meta, Tesla, and Bitcoin. So it's interesting to see that of the top 13, lucky 13, I have 5 positions in 5 of them. So let's carry on a little bit. Let's look at some asset performance too. What's happened since the post-C19 quantitative easing. Crude oil, the winner here, and this is courtesy of Econometrics. Crude oil wins up over 400%. But remember, crude oil went to basically zero during COVID. Okay, you could have been paid to take oil off people's hands because they couldn't manage it. There was too much of it sitting in boats. So you could have got oil for free at this, and this is why these numbers are a little bit messed up from the oil perspective, but interesting nonetheless. Number 2 performer is Bitcoin. Number 3 is S&P 500. Technically, if you had the QQQ in there, the Nasdaq, that would outperform S&P 500. U.S. homes, real estate, for the real estate people in the house, that is almost held as strong as the S&P 500, which is very impressive. Even now, because there's so few properties for sale, because people have locked in their long-term low interest rates, it makes the market very thin, which makes prices very high, which is vexing a lot of people. And then gold, of course. Gold is consistent and has been for the last 12 years. It's gone backwards. When you start debasing the value of the dollar, which has fallen in the same time frame, 25%, gold performance is even worse. So anyway, let's jump to the Bitcoin halving clock. 182 days to go. Half a year on the nose to April 17th. That's an exciting time. And what also is going to happen is not only Bitcoin is going to have in half a year, but the spot ETF is probably going to come in a quarter of a year, as we just mentioned. Bloomberg said 90% chance that it's coming in a quarter of a year. Let's look at some crypto stats as well. Today, you can see the market cap a little bit higher than it was 2 weeks ago. And the users a little bit lower, 5.54 million users versus 5.886 million users 2 weeks ago. But the transactions are higher, 36.5 million transactions versus 34.8 million transactions 2 weeks ago. So crypto is alive and well, and I expect this to really start growing very soon as people start realizing the bull market's in and people start getting back into the space and start transacting on chain and all sorts of things. So fun times. Let's look at the top 3 last week. Courtesy of K33. Top 3, courtesy of K33. That rhymes. Bitcoin up that 3% to 28.5. Binance hanging tough. Literally, it does not want to go below 210, 212. So here we are, up to 212 for the week, up 3%. And Ethereum flat, 1585. That has perplexed many. And we're seeing a lot of telltale signs that people are rotating out of different assets into different assets, which we'll watch the money in a second. Let's look at some other Bitcoin on-chain technicals, which are very important. And this was a big last 48 hours because Bitcoin got above all the key levels. We're talking about Bitcoin realized price, long-term holder realized price, short-term holder realized price, the 200-day moving average, the 21-week moving average. It got above everything. And that is very, very important because as history shows, thank you as well for the likes. I see them coming in there. I appreciate you. And the mods in the chat, I forgot to mention. But as history shows, during a bull market, it is rare that Bitcoin actually breaches below that 200-day. So we're going to watch that very carefully. We're above it now. We've been above it for a good chunk of this year so far. But we did have that summer doldrum, which was expected. And now things are looking strong. October is happening. And you know what's better than October? Is Movember. That's when things really move, even more than October. So let's look at another key factor here. This is from the team at Glassnode. They are looking at, looking at market cap and valuation. So the realized cap versus market cap. And the simple way to think about that is it's like the current price tag on what is in the store. So you imagine the current price tag on Bitcoin is 28,500. Now, the realized cap is like the total amount people actually paid for Bitcoin in the past. So it's the original price tag when they bought Bitcoin. And most of the time, the current price tag, which is the market cap, is higher than the original price tag, the realized cap. So if people sold their Bitcoin, they'd make a profit. But we know the smart holders are waiting for higher prices. But sometimes, especially during bad times, especially in bear markets, the current price tag can fall below the original price. And that means if people sold their Bitcoin, they'd be selling at a loss. And here we look at history of the times where this happened, where people were actually selling at a loss. 11 months back in 2015. Then we had about 4.5 months in 2018, 2019. And then we had, of course, our little bear here, 6 months, where things actually fell below price. So it's another simple illustration of kind of, I put the little, hope the Glassnode team don't mind, little bear faces. I've put another bear chart out on Patreon last night, so I decided to reuse that little bear because I thought he was very significant. But this shows you exactly where the bear markets hit, the cadence at which they hit, how long they last, and the fact that we're out right now. Now, in another interesting chart too, and I am fascinated, and I did promise you this week I'm going to do a video on Bitcoin hardness, because that's my whole thesis for getting into Bitcoin in the first place. But we'll look at the first time ever, we're going into a halving cycle where there is less available than ever before. So I cannot wait to see what happens. If the laws of economics apply, it'll be very good for price action. But this is from the top and bottom indicator. And you can see here, the pink is the amount HODL'd. It's what we call our HODL ratio. How much of the Bitcoin supply, it's actually 13.5 million of the Bitcoin supply is now held long term. And that is at a new all-time high. And remember, this normally happens as price kind of goes up. But this time is different because price is kind of steady, but people are hodling more than ever before. And I'll show you some other parallels why this time is different too, with some of the weird things we're seeing on chain, which is fascinating. So remember, sometimes things can be different. And we're seeing so much of that this year across so many different perspectives, especially in macro too. Let's look at, touch on briefly the fire drill yesterday. This is what they call the Cointelegraph market manipulation. Not sure, but allegedly, apparently an insider within Cointelegraph broke the news, but also had a position that they made some money on. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd read some stuff on Twitter, but you never know. But anyhow, it is a dress rehearsal on what would happen if a spot ETF was approved. There was a huge liftoff. In 8 minutes, Bitcoin price went up 7.4%, which was nuts. And it served as a timely reminder for the potential of the spot ETF if it is approved. Okay, super, super interesting as we go forward. But then things very much fade back down to earth when the world realizes it wasn't real, which is pretty apparent anyway, because it's not something that the SEC does so quickly from kind of deciding they weren't going to appeal a case. There's no way they do it that fast. In addition, what did happen though as a result of this, which is another kind of interesting piece of on-chain data, over the course of yesterday, 7,000 Bitcoin, or $200 million worth, vacated exchanges. And while some movement may be in response to that misinformation, but the flurry of on-chain has persisted both before and after. So it's like, why would this happen? And I try to think, why are these big players moving immediately off the exchange? Because they thought maybe the news was real. And then they said, okay, the Bitcoin ETF is coming. I don't trust the exchange anymore. I'm taking it all off. I'm sticking it in cold storage because I know the price is going to go up. That could be one theory behind exactly why that happened again. More and more scarcity, less on exchanges. As I said before, I think last weekend or last week, if somebody came in with $60 billion, that would deplete all of the liquid supply. That's all, $60 billion, which is probably the amount the US government spends every day. It increases debt. So anyway, just for perspective, $60 billion as when I was growing up, there was an unthinkable amount of money. Today, it's a spit in the bucket. And that's how the world changes. Now, let's look at the SEC deadlines. So this is kind of funny. A couple of ththings are marked here. VanEck, Wisdom Tree, Fidelity, and their second deadline, 1017, 1017, and 1017, which are all today. Okay. Now, you can see here that what's going to happen? Who's going to get approved first? I think because of the power of BlackRock, I think they will get approved, or everybody will get approved at the same time. And it'll happen in January of 2024. But there's lots of confusion around this. And any dates that are in red have already been delayed. It doesn't mean they're being rejected. They're being delayed. And this is the full list of all of these funds. And can you imagine the money flow when all of these things do get approved? It's going to be bonkers. So as I always say, stay healthy, everybody. Buckle in, relax. Good times are coming ahead. Now, another indicator as to how this whole spot ETF is actually imminent is I track every single day in our little model here, the actual Grayscale discounts. And I shared this model on Patreon earlier today. And you can see here, for the first time ever in years, the GBTC discount over Bitcoin is 13%. That was 50% in January. Now it's 13%. 2.5 months ago, the ETH discount was 55%. Now it's 25%. And a couple of others there as well. You can see exactly Bitcoin price, how many shares you need to have one whole Bitcoin, about 92.67 shares of MicroStrategy. But that'll cost you a little bit more than buying spot ETF Bitcoin itself, or spot Bitcoin itself. So they are the discounts. But that is a good indicator that the fact that things are coming down, which means the odds of approval are very high. And again, Bloomberg came out and said 90% sure thing is going to happen. And it's going to happen very soon. 90% sure that it's going to happen in 90 days, hence the whole 90-day thing. Let's look at Bitcoin Nasdaq correlation. These things are normally very tightly correlated. You see here, they kind of went off the reservation back in August and deviated from each other, but now they're coming back in. So Nasdaq over the last 90 days is down 3%, and Bitcoin is down 7.67%. But you can see the rampage that Bitcoin has been on since the middle of September. And again, September was expected to be terrible. It ended up being positive, which again, this time is different. This time is different news. Now let's look at AltSeason. Now this is a relative index over the last 90 days of how altcoins perform in relation to Bitcoin. You can see it's down at 16, which means Bitcoin is the heavyweight gorilla, and very, very few assets are actually beating Bitcoin. Let's look at what those assets look like. The ones over the last 30 days that are beating is Solana and BSV up the most in terms of returns. Then you have Link and Stacks and Maker, Injective Protocol, ICP. A lot of people are asking for me to do should I buy a video on Injective Protocol? So if you want me to, let me know below. But I keep on getting peppered on that one. And it's probably because it's doing so well right now as well. And then if you look at the right-hand side, you see all of the things like Polkadot and XLM and Optimism, etc., not doing very well at all, which should not be surprising because you can tell a lot from tokenomics if they're going to do well or not. It's pretty simple. Let's look at money flows. So a lot of good news this week. So these are the money flows, still positive. So we're on our third week of positive money flow after 6 weeks of drawdowns, which is very good. It's, I think, about 15 million net came in. Not a lot, but trading volumes were about 27% below the average for 2023. Again, still quiet, but positive, which is good. Let's look at the breakdown again of by asset and Bitcoin. So 16 million coming in. Year-to-date inflow is 260 million. Short Bitcoin saw inflows of 1.7 million too, which is interesting despite all the bullish news that happened late Friday. So I guess they didn't have the news before they got into those positions. And it's worth noting as well that Friday's close couldn't capture the positive news out of the US regarding the SEC not appealing the Grayscale legal challenge, which will pave the way for a spot ETF. And that's exciting if you're in Bitcoin. Now, if you look at some of the other names, outflows, Tezos, Litecoin, Chainlink, also outflows about 250,000, 280,000, and 310,000 respectively. XRP saw a modest inflow of about XRP $400,000, which is not bad. And of course, the winner still, And the darling of the year, ignoring Bitcoin, is Solana, up another 3.7 million. So you see, just look at the Ethereum drainage of 7.4, and it's rotating into other assets. And it seems to be the one catching all of this money is Solana, which is good. And that's also reflected in the price action. Let's look at the best three and the worst three of the week. BSV, Stacks, and Solana all had the top three gainers from the top 50. And the losers were Mint, Cosmos, and Avalanche as well. Actually, if you look at the performance year to date for these two as well, it's not that good. Down 30%, 31%, and 14% respectively for the three losers. Not good. Solana year to date up 144%, Stacks up 156%, and BSV flat. So don't be, the important thing is you got to look at the overall trend and how things are performing, not week to week, which is interesting to look at. But, you know, if something pumps 20% for a week, look at how it's done year to date to get a picture of exactly where it's going. Now, let's look at some layer 1, layer 2 daily active users. You can see the liveliness of crypto is coming back a little bit. Polygon beats Ethereum, 329K versus 326K. Number 3 in the box is Solana, 256,000 daily active users. Arbitrum, 107,000. Arbitrum is one of the layer 2s now that's garnering a lot of business. And so is Base, 88,500 users. And that's a very new layer 2. Avalanche, 29K. Sui, 22. Sui has been a total failure, but that was totally to be expected. Fantom, 22 as well. Sui and Fantom have the same amount of daily active users. And Cardano, 26,000 daily active users as well. So they're the kind of the top chains so far. Now, what I always like to look at as well is layer 1, layer 2s divided by daily active users. The fully diluted market cap, which takes into account the amount of dilution coming down the pike. Dilution is the kiss of death. Remember, as an investor, don't believe your appreciation will outgrow things like 18% dilution. It's not going to. Now, here you see a key number I want you to focus on is the median, the 141,000. That's the amount of fully diluted market cap per user. So do you want to pay that? That's the question. That's the median of all of these chains here. But the winner is Fantom. They have only $26,000 worth of fully diluted market cap per user. That makes it, on this metric, the cheapest chain. Binance number 2, 29K. Solana number 3, 53K. Elrond, 62K. And then Arbitrum, 75K. And Optimism, 108K. After that's a cutoff. You see Sui, etc., 175K. And down the very bottom, you got Flow, 2.2 million of fully diluted market cap per user. Now, how many NFTs do you need to sell to sustain that $2.2 million per user? I don't think many of the Flow users are spending that much or can it be monetized. So that's why these numbers, when you get that high, you know it's an absolute ridiculous valuation. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, enough of that. Let's also talk about a little bit of Solana news too. And Solana's getting so much headlines. I mean, I could talk for an hour about all the good stuff that happened this week. But this is from temporal.x, oxtemporal on Twitter. X, I should say. Ox on X. Fantastic news, but not entirely surprising. App development on Solana outpaces all ETH layer 2s combined and has been this way for quite some time. And do not fade the builders. There are some trends out there that show overall number of developers across all chains is down. That's what typically happens in a bear, despite the fact that you can build in a bear. But also, it's not just so much how many bodies you have, but how good those bodies are as well. The other thing that we should stress them, how active they are, how many commits, etc., how many repositories. These are things you need to look at as well in conjunction. But this is big news. A lot of stuff is being built on the Solana chain. Now, this is, I want to shout out to Solar Power in the Patreon community who created this beautiful graphic. It is all the top stocks in the history of the Earth and the most performance in terms of the number of decades from the IPO at the bottom. So if you see 1, that's 10 years, 2 is 20 years, 3, etc. And how these companies have grown over time. It's interesting. I had a great interview yesterday with Anderson W., who had Walmart shares from back in the day, which was life-changing. And it's nice to see Walmart here as well. But again, thank you, Solar Power, for putting this together. What's interesting as well is you break this down and you look at Walmart. It has crushed it. but a lot of the gains happened in the first 25 years. Since then, it's been kind of relatively flat. If you look at black, which is Apple, you'll notice the time that Steve Jobs was not there and when he came back, and the difference he made to the stock when he came back. Unbelievable. It shows you the power of one leader as well. If we look at other names like Google, nearly 20 years since the IPO, and it's not doing as well as some of the other names like Amazon, even Walmart on a Lindy basis. Nvidia is ahead of it too. And we know Nvidia has been on fire over the last year or so. And then what else? Nvidia exploded. But the key thing I want to look at is try to identify where the puck is going to be. So I took Solar Power's beautiful graphic and I added a big red arrow to it. That's where I believe the Tesla price will go. I know it'll be a $4 trillion market cap company. It'll get there quicker than any company in the history of the world. And that's where you want to position yourself. That's just trajectory. Nothing has a steeper trajectory as Tesla does as well. So read them and weep, enjoy it, and get your position because it will be life-changing just like Bitcoin. And that's what we do here. Speaking of Tesla and tailwinds for earnings tomorrow, a lot of stuff is down. The cost of aluminium, the cost of lithium, which is one of the biggest inputs to the cost of vehicles, down 75% since Q4 2022, approximately, right around Christmas. It's come down a lot. And that should make the cost of goods sold lower, which will increase margins, which are a key thing that the Wall Street analysts are looking for tomorrow. But I'm still hoping that the news will be good, but Wall Street won't be able to interpret it and the price will fall. And then we load up. So that's the plan. Now, this is also an interesting one too. Crime doesn't pay, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Sanjay as well for sharing this with me. This is how much time SBF will serve in jail prison. House arrest, hopefully there's no more house arrest for that guy. He has to go to a proper prison. But the odds of Sam Bankman-Fried getting 50 plus years in prison edged up to 27% according to Prison Prediction Markets, which I think is hilarious. I never even knew that existed until today. But it does. You can probably pretty much wager or bet on anything out there. And I thought that was interesting. Now, everything will be summarized in every video in the newsletter written by our community writers. So 12 cents a day for alpha that you may miss during the video. I know people watch the videos and I say, I'll say, did you not see the video yesterday where I talked about this with this? And they say, no, I missed it. I watched the video, but I missed it. But I go fast, so it's not hard. It's hard to catch everything. So this is like 5-minute read a day that summarizes everything with every slide. Okay, bad news, real fast. Global liquidity, unfortunately, ticked down a little bit. It ticked up last week and it's down again. And this is from the Rational Root. And kudos to him for his Bitcoin strategy platform, which I love very much. But again, it is ticking down and that is not good. We do expect it to tick up, especially with some of the crises happening in different parts of the world. Japan, China, and Europe, I believe, will start printing again. We're just waiting for a big shoe to drop. In addition, this is another piece of bad news. The miners are accelerating their Bitcoin selling. And remember at the beginning I spoke about how this time is different? Well, what typically happens historically, if you analyze all of the history, miners they are even Steven on their accumulation or hodling of Bitcoin up until the price goes really high. And then they start selling close to an all-time top. And then they sell all the way down. And if there's a desperate situation like C19, they dump it all too. They get very nervous, very rattled because cash in the hand is worth two in the bush, whatever they say. But sometimes now we have a situation where the Bitcoin price is actually going up and they're still selling the Bitcoin. And I believe the reason for this is, again, this is from our timing model, which is a whole bunch of embedded on-chain analytics in it. I believe they're doing this because they know unless they have state-of-the-art rigs for April 17th, 2024, they're going to be in trouble. So they're dumping their Bitcoin, which adds sell pressure to Bitcoin, even though they know they want to keep it if possible because the price is going up. They know that better than anybody, but they need the cash. That's too expensive to borrow right now with the high interest rates. So they're selling their Bitcoin and buying rigs as quickly as possible. My theory. And I need to do another miner video because it's all changing so fast. So Let me know if those things are of interest too. In addition, sadly, the Fantom Foundation Employee lost $7 million in some type of weird exploit where they made the money in the kitty to keep the chain alive and build it. And they have a lot of money too. It's way beyond 7 million. But that was a big hit to have lost 7 million because of negligence. And remember, these are professional blockchains and they still can be careless and make mistakes. So when you are your own bank, when you're a self-sovereign, literally button up that operational security very tight. And in ugly news today, not too much. In fact, just one piece. This is the big unlocks this week. The only really one to call out is Axie Infinity, a massive dump. If you have these gaming tokens, as I say, they're all money grabs. They have horrible compendium scores. This one is dumping 11.5% of the total supply on the market. And if you look at the new ATR model, it's dead. It's a zombie. So just if you are in these gaming things, maybe you like to play the games, but don't hold the tokens as an asset because you'll get your butt handed to you. And again, thank you to everybody on Patreon. The one place for everything you need about building that future for you and your family to get out of the Matrix, as they say. A movie I have yet to watch on my list. Shout out to Chewy too. It urges me to watch that movie. I don't like sci-fi. I'd rather read instead. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you to the mods in the chat. We have a huge crowd as well. Over 2,200 people watching live and 500 likes. So thank you so much for the support. Throw another one on there on the way out if you want. A lot of work goes into these things for me and the team. I love you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's our usual fun day as well. Okay? Bye, everybody. Tomorrow is face-off time. See you.